Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, it's been a while since we have visited friend of the channel, Yarnhub. And I say friend of the channel because they are actually subscribed to me, and they've always been very gracious and kind in their views toward me and what I do with reaction videos. So I'm always glad to go back and revisit their channel and shine a light on the fantastic work that they do. They just went over 1 million subscribers not too long ago, so congratulations, Yarnhub. Richly deserved. I'm told that since I've last looked at their videos, they've really kind of gone up a big time notch in terms of the quality of their animations, which I always thought were great anyway, and I thought did a great job in telling stories, but I'm curious to see what it looks like now. And we're going to take a look at the video on Operation Vengeance, which if you're a student of World War II, you're probably familiar with. But this is the operation that specifically targeted the Japanese naval commander, Isoroku Yamamoto, the guy who was kind of the mastermind of the Pearl Harbor attack. And this leads to a much larger question that we can ask in times of war. And this is actually something that got explored in the TV show The West Wing. In fact, I think there was an episode called We Killed Yamamoto, because the whole episode centers around when is it okay to target an individual who might be a threat to your nation or to peace. So that raises that question. Is it okay in time of war to target an individual? This goes all the way back to ancient times, but just in American history, think about the American Revolution, where the American patriots, particularly guys who were riflemen, who had rifles that were a little more accurate, would often target officers for command and control. And it was considered kind of uncivilized to do that, to specifically target officers. So those are the kinds of questions that something like Operation Vengeance causes us to have to think about. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into this. As always, the link is in the description down at the bottom. So definitely check out Yarnhub and all of their fantastic content. They tell a lot of really, really good stories, and they do so in a very engaging and compelling way. I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's go ahead and dive in.
It's April the 18th, 1943, and a squadron of P-38s races low over the waves of the Pacific. In the formation, First Lieutenant Rex Barber struggles under the oppressive heat of the cockpit, but he soldiers on, aware that they're on the hunt for the highest profile target of their careers, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the man who orchestrated Pearl Harbor, who flaunted that he'll negotiate peace at the White House.
So Yamamoto actually has some history with the United States. He actually went to school in the U.S. at an Ivy League school. I think it was Harvard, but I can't remember for sure if it was Harvard or Yale. Pretty sure it was Harvard. Spoke English, was very familiar with American culture, did not probably say, I fear all we've done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve, but he certainly felt that way, and that is consistent with how he viewed war with the United States. He knew the capabilities of the United States. He knew that Japan couldn't win a long-term war with the U.S., and by this point in the war, I think he understands that Japan long-term can't win. But he's still a good sailor. He's going to do his job, and the U.S. recognizes his importance as well, which is why they're specifically sending this mission to target him.
The American squadron presses on, the shore of Bougainville coming into view. Rex Barber scans the skies. Intelligence had been very specific. 1 Betty bomber and 2 flights of 3 Zeros, right here, right at this time. Their plan is simple and calculated. 12 Lightnings are going to climb high and cover them from above, while remaining P-38s, a 4-man killer group, will focus entirely on the bomber with the target.
I really love how they're presenting this. It's almost like watching a movie. It's really quite good. It's impressive stuff. This just once again highlights the extreme importance of intelligence during the Second World War. There's probably never been a war where intelligence gathering and interpreting and deciphering has made such a difference in the outcome. And not just intelligence, but also counterintelligence and deceiving the enemy using those same means. There's this whole war within the war that's going on that there are endless stories that could be told about it. And, we know that from Midway, and we know how much went into that with things like Normandy. And obviously here, breaking the Japanese code has led us to know exactly where Yamamoto is going to be and when.
They almost reach Bougainville when the radio signal comes in.
Bogies, 11 o'clock high.
As if on cue, an enemy formation emerges between the clouds. 6 zeros, however, not one, but 2 Betty bombers.
Take them both.
American pilots are taken aback. Their plan is falling apart.
Which one of them is Yamamoto's?
No plan survives contact with the enemy. As good as your intelligence is, there are always going to be surprises. Something's always going to go wrong. You're going to have to... This is where intelligence matters, but also thinking on your feet and being able to quickly make decisions matters as well.
We'll have to take them both. Roger
Yep.
that.
The formation slams their throttles to full, charging into battle. All around Barber, 12 of his squadmates climb rapidly into the sky, taking position as top cover and leaving the 4 chosen to perform the daring charge. But there's more
Drop
problems.
tanks. So
First,
what they're dropping there is this is extra fuel tanks that give them more range. So you burn up that fuel, and then you drop them because it's going to hurt your maneuverability and your speed and your ability to climb, things like that.
Lieutenant Besby Holmes' drop tanks aren't coming off. Barber is nervous to see
Shake 'em
Holmes
loose.
dive out of formation, picking up speed to shake off the tanks. Wingman Raymond Hine quickly follows to protect him, cutting the killer's flight numbers in half. Like legendary commanders, back in the sky, Barber and Lamphere remain undeterred. Yamamoto is right in front of them. Hell would freeze over before the American pilots let him go. Yamamoto is on his way to visit one of their forward operating airfields around Bougainville with 8 of his officers, and among them is his second-in-command, loyal Chief of Staff Matomi Ugaki. Ugaki is dozing off in his seat when unexpectedly one of their Zero escorts races past
wake you
and
up.
slows right in front of his Betty's nose, shaking
You
his
gotta
wings.
imagine how this
Confused.
must have felt to these guys, because they think they're just on a routine transport mission. They're, obviously have escort fighters just in case, but they're just going from point A to point B between 2 Japanese bases, and they obviously don't realize that their code has been cracked in such a way that their flight plans are known by the Americans.
Ugaki takes a closer look and realizes the pilot is waving his hand, frenetically pointing at something. Then suddenly, the radio operator shouts for the pilot to dive, and the Betty breaks into an abrupt, evasive maneuver. The officers all hang on for dear life as the Japanese bomber plunges into a desperate dive.
I should mention, too, that you keep hearing that term Betty. Betty is a term that was used by the Americans. They had names for all of these different Japanese planes. So you had Judy's and Kate's and Betty's. It was just a way to differentiate them for Americans.
Ugaki is trying and failing to spot Yamamoto's aircraft. Outside, 3 Zeros dive for the pair of incoming P-38s, desperate to stop the attack. Lamphere breaks formation, climbing to attack the Japanese fighters head-on and leaving Barber to charge in alone. Lamphere opens fire, and the Zeros respond in kind, with tracers crisscrossing in the sky. Lamphere's unfazed as low-caliber guns strike him in the wings, the sounds reverberating through the fuselage like hail. He holds the trigger down, unleashing his weapons until the Zeros are forced to pull off from the collision course. Barber, though, carries on, leaving
Now, one
the
thing these American fighters have going for them compared to the Japanese Zeros is they're going to hold up better. They're not going to be taken down quite as easily. They're bigger, they're stronger. They're obviously not going to be as maneuverable as a Zero, but they can take a beating compared to what the Zeros can.
melee behind. Before him, the 2 Bettys separate in opposite directions. He picks one at random and gives chase. But he's not alone. Suddenly, a tracer streaks past just in front of his cockpit. A Zero from Lamphere's fight has chased him down and is firing in from above.
Uh-oh.
The tracers continue to zip past his windshield. He fights the urge to pull away and aims
Now, this is, again, where you have to make those decisions, right? Is your life and bailing on this target worth the opportunity here, or do you stick with your target knowing you might die in the process, but you've got to bring this plane down? And it might not even be Yamamoto's plane. He might be in the other one.
his sights square on the bomber. Barber pulls the trigger and unleashes a hail of 50 caliber and 20mm fire. The shells rip through the enemy aircraft, parts fall away from the engine cowling, and a plume of oil pours out of the machine. But Barber is relentless. He holds the trigger down, even as he hears and feels his own aircraft being hit from behind. He'll have to take this bomber, even if it's the last thing he ever does.
That takes guts to stick with your target even as you're being fired on, and everything within you has got to be saying, move, maneuver, get out of the way, save yourself. He's sticking with his target.
But then, the Zero hounding him roars past, giving him a few vital moments of reprieve. Barber takes a better aim and continues dismantling the bomber, tearing it apart as he chases it all the way down to treetop height. Then, suddenly, the bomber pulls up out of control and rolls in the air. Barber immediately dodges, barely missing the bomber's wing as it tumbles out of control and crashes into a tree below, exploding into a massive fireball. Barber looks back over his shoulder to see a column of black smoke rising from the green.
It's down. What's next?
He sets off for the next one. But 3 more Zeros intercept him from above. They open fire, and Barber dodges, diving away for speed.
Where's your fighter
as
cover?
he listens to the enemy bullets striking the wings and tail, the crackle of impacts echoing through the fuselage. Barber skims the treetops, dodging left and right in a desperate fight for survival. The 3 enemies are refusing to ease up. But just as things get dire, he spots the 2 P-38s of Holmes and Hine up ahead.
There you go.
There's hope. He flies towards them, praying for them to see him. To his luck, his prayers are answered. The pair of lightnings turn straight towards him, charging in to the rescue. But muzzle flashes shine on their noses. His heart sinks. Time slows to a crawl as the friendly tracers barrel down straight towards him.
That's gutsy.
He holds his aircraft steady, and the shells streak by all around him. He's surrounded by lead. Shots allied an enemy enveloping his machine. The lightnings come closer and closer, guns blazing, until they roar past overhead. And suddenly, the skies fall to an abrupt calm. Barber looks back, shaken. All the aircraft are gone. The P-38s are speeding off, and the Zeros have been scattered by the 2 lightnings' daring attack.
Where's the other bomber?
He takes a deep breath and sets off for the last Betty. Holmes and Hine turn back around after saving Barber's tail.
Yeah, because remember, there's supposed to be 4 of these guys that are going after these targets.
The shot had been risky, but it had worked, and now they chase after the last remaining bomber. Holmes hunts it down as it tries to escape, skimming the waves out to sea. Holmes opens fire, dumping as much ammunition as he can into the massive target. But the aircraft stubbornly remains aloft as it fills more and more of his windshield.
Go down or blow up. Damn it.
He keeps up the attack for as long as he dare, before dodging low, sending his P-38 roaring through the gap between the enemy and the sea.
See, this is the thing when you're attacking a slower target, especially as you're damaging it and it's going to slow down even more. At some point, you're not going to be able to fly slow enough to stay behind it. You're going to have to zip past it, hopefully having done enough damage.
Rex Barber watches his squadmate narrowly avoid collision with a severely wounded Betty. But then he quickly realizes that the target is still flying.
Get in there and hit it.
He dives in without skipping a beat and gets right on the bomber's tail and pulls the trigger. His volley strikes the fuel tank and detonates the fumes. The bomber is engulfed in flames and plunges into the sea. Barber has
So
no
the first one, I believe, is the one that did have Yamamoto on it, because that plane not only crashed in the jungle, it's still there. I've had this dream for a long time that if I ever get the chance to go to Guadalcanal, that I'll go to that island, and you have to go like several hours into the jungle, but the plane is still there.
time to react, and he flies straight into the explosion with flames surrounding his aircraft. But he emerges on the other side, unharmed.
Yeah, guys, Yarnhub, fantastic work with this animation. My goodness, it's so good. It's like watching a movie, like I said.
He can't celebrate just yet. Right ahead, he sees Holmes and Hine tangling with a pair of Zeros. Hine's P-38 is littered with lead and
So at this point, mission is done. You've brought down both of the bombers. You've obviously done your job. If you can get away, but you got to deal with the immediate threat first.
dives away with heavy damage, while one of the Zeros is taken out by Holmes. Barber crashes into the fight, catching the last Zero unaware and gunning him out of the sky.
How's your subscribe level? Very low. How about out here? If everyone subscribed, then that would be the mission accomplished.
I'm like,
Then-
I'm sitting here thinking, what did they mean by subscribe in 1943? But now I get it. He just means subscribe.
Finally, the squadron leader comes through on the radio.
Everyone, get your ass home.
But while
well
a
done
jubilant
mission.
squadron returns to base, a figure emerges from the sea, surrounded by the flaming wreck of his aircraft. It's Matomi Ugaki, badly injured, but alive. The pilot also miraculously survived, and together the two men both swam back to shore, clinging on to a piece of debris. A third survivor would also be picked up by flying boat after the accident, becoming the only three crew from the bombers to return home. Yamamoto had been in the first bomber. He was killed by Barber's gunfire before the aircraft even crashed.
Yeah, I was going to say, they know this because the plane crashed intact enough that they were able to recover the bodies.
His body was found and he was buried. His loss inflicted a heavy emotional wound for the Japanese. The widely respected admiral was mourned across the nation. He was given a full state funeral with the highest of honors, which crowds gathered to attend. Very few were affected harder than Ugaki, who never forgave himself for surviving the attack. He would write
Survivor's
about
guilt.
the events in his diary, recalling, "Tracers flashed by our wings and the pilot frantically maneuvered to evade. I waited impatiently for the airplane to return to horizontal position so that I could observe the Admiral's bomber. Although I hoped for the best, I knew only too well what the fate of the airplane would be." The P-38's nose seemed to burst into twinkling flame, and suddenly the bomber shook from the impact of the enemy's machine
Wow.
gun bullets and cannon shells. Everything turned black. I felt the crushing force of salt water pouring into the fuselage, and almost immediately we were below the surface. Ugaki continued to serve in the Navy for the rest of the war, until the Emperor declared the end of hostilities on the 15th of August 1945. Indignant, that same day he dressed in his officer's clothes,
Harakiri.
took a ceremonial sword gifted to him by Yamamoto, and set off in the last kamikaze attack of the war.
Really? Wow.
On the American side, the death of Yamamoto was received with great fanfare, but not all was celebration. Tragically, First Lieutenant Raymond Hine would never make it home. His crippled P-38 gave out underneath him somewhere in the return flight.
That I did not know. That's interesting. So I didn't know about either one of those and their fate.
Every member of the flight would be given the Navy Cross for their involvement in the attack. Rex Barber would survive the war,
Hey, look! Flogging through history right there. It's on the list of patrons. That's cool.
and return home, passing away on July the 26th, 2001.
Wow. Incredible story. Fascinating stuff. I'm very curious to see exactly what Ugaki's fate was. So Ugaki made a last entry in his diary noting he had not yet received an official ceasefire order and that he alone was to blame for the failure of his valiant aviators to stop the enemy, so he would fly one last mission himself to show the true spirit of Bushido. So his subordinates protested even after he had climbed into the back seat of a Judy dive bomber that was piloted by a lieutenant, and he kicked a guy off the kamikaze roster to take his spot. And then, yeah, this is the photo taken right before he loaded up into that plane and went on that mission. So it was off the coast of Okinawa. Looks like they were intercepted. Next morning, they found the still smoldering remains of a cockpit with 3 bodies on the beach. The third man, his head crushed and right arm missing, wore a dark green uniform and a short sword was found nearby. The sailors buried the bodies in the sand. So there you have it. All right, fantastic job, Yarnhub. Really enjoyed that. If you have another particular Yarnhub video you'd like me to take a look at, let me know in the comment section below. Definitely check out their channel. If you liked that, you will love their content. Mostly it concerns battles and wars and things of that nature. They're much about military history, but there's a lot worth checking out. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.